change in a fish tank. That's how you need to change your water in the fish tank. It's mostly to dilute away the toxicity. But if that is paired with a plant component, that fertilizer is now a source of nutrients for the plants. And as the plants grow, that toxicity is removed in a natural way. And so even with Malawi, the small aquaponics system that you mentioned, that resembles the greater technology of aquaponics. And it also reduces quite a bit the maintenance needed to have a fish tank at home. Because there's the plant component in it, there are really no water changes needed, as that is the source of nutrients for the plants, and then the plants in return filter the fresh water back for the fish. I would say that we have since evolved, and we are now working with JustLearn, which produces Planet Box, which is a similar product, but it is more suitable for teaching environments. And so we are breaking down all these principles, these cycles and ingredients, such as the nitrogen cycle and nitrification, and we've paired it now with curriculum, where we have deployed it in homes and schools, both before and through the pandemic for social distance learning. And we are facilitating a lot of environmental science and biology and life science topics through hands-on learning using Planet Box.
Yes, you mentioned it, fertilizer. What is the effect of fertilizer with the fresh water, and how the new innovation, how we're going to prevent the fertilizer from going into a fresh water, for example? Any idea?
Yeah, for sure. So, I would start by saying, look at the natural ecosystems around the world, or for example, a specific habitat such as the Amazon forest. It's so rich in biodiversity. It has millions, if not billions, of species working together in conjunction with each other. And there's no waste or trash, at least how we define it. At the same time, there's no one there adding water, fertilizing, the trees. It's just working in a very balanced way. So agriculture, when we destroy these ecosystems, which is effectively what is done to produce calories for us or other agriculture products, we come into these habitats and we strip it off of its biodiversity, all the ancient organisms that have worked together, and we usually introduce a monocrop. If you keep growing this monocrop, even if you rotate it across a few different monocrops, eventually you start depleting the natural sources of fertilizers from this area. And so that's where supplementation usually comes in, mostly nitrogen. However, this nitrogen is not efficiently used by the plants because it's not a controlled environment like a hydroponic or aquaponic system. And what happens is usually when it rains or just from the irrigation discharge, there's a lot of nitrogen runoff and other fertilizers as well, such as phosphorus and a few others. But this makes its way into rivers, into water reserves. And what it does is it unbalances the ecosystem at large. Some of the first consequences of that is because there's now a source of fertilizer, such as nitrogen, the algae that are also work like plants there, in that they use fertilizers for photosynthesis, all of a sudden have above normal source of nutrients for them. But when you get these algae blooms, which are a byproduct of these fertilizer runoffs, now the algae competes with other organisms for oxygen. And that's where, you get some habitat damage, because you have an algae bloom, which is at first a sign that there are a lot of nutrients, but in the long run, an unbalance of the ecosystem. So with controlled environment agriculture, in some cases precision agriculture as well, one has the ability to more accurately fine-tune the fertilizers and just as much as one needs without necessarily creating any waste product. And because of that, one reduces the need of fertilizer, but also reduces the waste of this discharge into the natural ecosystem, which is what aquaponics really exhibits.
Good point you touch. In Sarasota, on the beach of Siesta Key, sometime we get thousands and millions of fish, dead fish. And was that caused by fertilizers and algae?
Yeah, for sure. Here in Florida, we have the red tide, and I think it's related mostly to phosphorus, but it's usually a byproduct of these agriculture practices. And these are not only consequential in that they deplete the oxygen in the water for other organisms, but usually there are toxins as well, and acidification for the ocean. So when you get fertilizer runoff into the ocean, as well, when paired with the differences in temperature from a climatic change of events, which is happening as we speak in geological timeline, you get acidification of the oceans. So not only does that damage the local habitats that we see, but also coral reefs and organisms that are very sensitive to to the parameters that they're used to.
Great answer. If you're joining us, we got a great guest today talking about agriculture and aquaponic and vertical farming. JIMO Serodio, entrepreneur from University of Tampa. JIMO, there's a saying that vertical farming saves land. Can you elaborate on that?
For sure. So, agriculture is a much wider footprint of our species than cities, for example. So urbanization is actually a pretty good trend for our species. A few years ago, we officially went from having more people living in rural settings than in urban settings. And we are now majority living in cities. And the footprint of these cities around the world, are somewhere between 3 and 5%, which, while a huge amount of space, is not as much space as the land required to produce food for these 8 billion or so people. And so agriculture, at the end of the day, is by and large the most responsible cause of the environmental destruction that I stand for and stand for addressing, and that is widely responsible for species extinction and species lost around the world. The main resources, of course, are water, fresh water, which I'm happy to talk about. But as it relates to land, we roughly require about 10 times more land for agriculture than we do for living, from a civil standpoint. And so land is one of those resources that are extremely limited. Our planet is covered roughly in 30% land. And what we're doing is we are looking for the most soil-rich and nutrient-rich and perfect conditions for agriculture, and we move in and we destroy these habitats to make room for farming. So the promise of vertical farming is that by reducing the land footprint while increasing the yield, one is able to grow, 5, 10, 50 times more crops per square foot or per square meter than one would with traditional agriculture. Again, I mentioned that there are other trade-offs with this. While one might improve yield per area, there are still other externalities, in particular carbon costs that go into that. And so I wouldn't consider vertical farming, the complete solution for everything. But at the end of the day, it is just that. It is an improve in yield per square foot of land dedicated to farming. When paired, for example, to rooftops where this, surface area would go wasted, I think that makes a lot of sense. And also in some cases for low shelf life products such as, a few herbs and leafy greens, that also makes sense. But there is no way that we will be able to feed the world, particularly, with rice, wheat, and corn, using vertical farming. And so that's why, my work today is much less about vertical farming, but more about a holistic way of completely alleviating the exploitation of inputs such as fresh water and fertilizers into the agriculture systems.
Great answer. We're just about to finish the first part. If you're just joining us, our guest today, JIMO Serodio, we're talking about aquaponic agriculture. JIMO, do you mind putting on, talking about your phone number and then your email or your website for people who want to join us?
Yeah, for sure. The easiest way to reach out to me is my email address. It's JIMO@JustLearn.io. I'll put it in the bio, but it's spelled DJIMO@JustLearn.io.
Great. So we're going to go into we've just finished your first part. We're going to go into the second part. There's more questions coming your way. Great guest, JIMO SERODIO.